Selma woke to the sound of bells. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling above her was carved wood and plaster. The bed beneath her too soft. The air too still. Then memory returned. The mansion, the drawing room, the night she wished she could scrub from her mind. But it was Sunday. Somehow, the knowledge steadied her. Sundays had always been quieter days in her life, even as an orphan, a chance to rest, to sketch, to breathe. She rose, smoothing the wrinkles from her nightgown before crossing to the wardrobe. Her suitcase had been unpacked neatly by unseen hands, her modest collection of clothes folded among silks and satins that weren't hers. The contrast was jarring, but grounding. After a pause, she chose a forest green dress with a high neckline and a flowing skirt, pairing it with a thin cream cardigan she had packed for cool mornings. It wasn't dazzling, but it was neat, comfortable, and enough to carry her through the day ahead. The breakfast hall was already alive with chatter when she arrived. De Vere glowed with satisfaction. Laurent and Van Holt whispered behind their cups, and Evelyn sipped tea quietly at the far end. Alaric sat at the head of the table, immaculate in dark gray, as composed as if the night before had never happened. Selma ate little, grateful when conversation shifted away from her to the day's plans. Alaric's voice carried over the table like a conductor's baton. "Ladies, I trust you've settled in well. Today will be entertaining. Consider it an opportunity. Each of you will demonstrate a talent of your choosing." A ripple of excitement passed through the women, some eager, others smug, already imagining how they would shine. Alaric continued, his eyes glinting, a small contest, if you will. "Show me what you excel at. Show me who you are." The room moved quickly into performance. Laurent was first, claiming the piano with practiced confidence. Her fingers flew, precise and elegant, though the music rang a little too perfectly, like crystal without warmth. Van Holt followed with poetry, reciting verses in French. Her tone was flawless, her diction pristine, every syllable a small weapon. De Vere rose with a rapier she pulled from a display case. The servants looked uneasy, but Alaric waved them off. She demonstrated fencing forms with crisp, deadly grace, ending with a bow that drew applause. Klein volunteered nervously, cheeks flushed as she sang an operatic aria. Her voice wavered, then steadied, filling the hall with surprising strength. Laughed at herself afterward, drawing polite, if uneven, clapping. Others displayed calligraphy, heart pieces, stories of equestrian triumphs. Each talent was elegant, acceptable, polished for their world. At last, eyes turned toward Selma. She hadn't prepared anything. She hadn't even imagined being part of this spectacle. For a moment, she considered declining outright, but something in her resisted being dismissed. She looked up, meeting Alaric's gaze. "I'll need paints," she said simply. The words startled the room. Murmurs rippled, some derisive, some intrigued. Alaric tilted his head, brows lifting in genuine surprise. "Paints," yes, Selma said, calm and steady. "Canvas, brushes, and paint. If that can be arranged." His eyes narrowed with interest, then flicked toward Victor. A few minutes later, servants hurried in with supplies, not ordinary paints, but the best. Rich oils, pigments ground from lapis, cinnabar, and malachite. The brushes were sable, the canvas stretched linen. Selma's breath caught. She'd never touched tools like these. The other smirked, expecting her to falter under the weight of such luxury. She sat at the easel, dipped the brush into cobalt blue, and began. Not upright, but upside down. Murmurs filled the hall. "She doesn't know what she's doing. It's nonsense. Childish." Selma ignored them. The world narrowed to brush and canvas, her hand moving with quiet certainty. She lost herself in line, shade, and shape, building something only she could see. Minutes passed. To the others, it still looked like a mess, strokes suggesting nothing, an exercise in futility. Then she stopped, lifted the canvas, and turned it right side up. Gasps echoed across the hall. A portrait gazed back at them. Evelyn, the quiet woman in dusky silk. Selma had captured not only her likeness, but her essence, the intelligence in her eyes, the softness of her mouth, the dignity that her silence had hidden. Evelyn's hand flew to her lips. "You painted me?" Selma smiled faintly. "You're kind. I thought it deserved to be seen." The room hushed. Alaric leaned forward, his gaze intent. Surprise flickered in his expression, not feigned, not controlled, genuine. He had expected something small, an amusing trifle, not mastery. Not this. Slowly, he turned his head toward Victor, who stood at the edge of the room, stone-faced as always. For the briefest second, Alaric's eyes narrowed, sharp with the unspoken question, "Why didn't you know this?" Victor's brow arched, and he gave the slightest shrug, as if to say, "I don't know, she fooled me too." Alaric's lips pressed thin, but he said nothing. His gaze returned to Selma, sharper now, his interest edged with something harder. Bullen blinked rapidly, her voice catching, "It's beautiful." Some of the women clapped reluctantly. Others turned away, envious. But Evelyn's eyes shone with gratitude. Alaric rose slowly, crossing toward the easel. "We studied the portrait, then the tools. These are some of the finest paints in the world. And yet they look better in your hands than in my collection," he gestured. "Take them. They're yours." Selma hesitated, instinct warning her not to accept. But as her fingers brushed the handles of the brushes, something inside her softened. For the first time, his gift wasn't a chain, it was possibility. "Thank you," she said quietly. Alaric inclined his head, but inside, he felt a ripple of triumph. It wasn't only that she had accepted the gift, it was that his gamble had paid off. In a room full of carefully trained women, Selma had revealed herself as something more, a diamond hidden in coal. A talent no one had anticipated, not even his ever-watchful second. And she had done it on his stage, with his tools under his gaze. She thought the paints were a prize. But to Alaric, they were proof. Proof that he was right to single her out. Proof that she belonged to this game whether she liked it or not. And that knowledge pleased him more than her gratitude ever could. Monday morning arrived with the hush of endings. The contest was over, but its effects still trembled through the house like cracks in glass. The corridors thrummed with the sound of trunks being rolled, heels clicking on marble, clipped voices summoning cars. Selma stood near the edge of the great hall with her duffel bag slung across her shoulder, watching the ritual unfold. The women had lined up to bid Alaric goodbye, each rehearsing her part in the performance. But the air was different now, sharper. Painting had tilted the balance. Evelyn's gentleness had been revealed for all to see, and it made her shine. For some of the others, that glow was intolerable. Laurent and Van Holt whispered viciously in corners, their eyes flashing whenever they landed on Selma. De Vere's laughter rang down the hall. Brittle, barbed, carrying an edge meant to cut. Even Klein, once neutral, avoided Selma's gaze as though refusing to be drawn into the shifting storm. The contest had entertained Alaric. For the women, it had destabilized their hierarchy. And Selma, without asking, had been thrust into the center. Laurent approached Alaric first, curtsying with elegant precision. Van Holt leaned close, whispering something that made his mouth curve but not his eyes. De Vere pressed a kiss to his cheek, lingering far too long, claiming space in front of the others. Then Evelyn stepped forward. She didn't flirt, didn't posture. She only extended her hand. Alaric accepted it, polite but detached. When she turned to leave, she paused by Selma, slipping her hand into hers with a gentle squeeze. "Thank you," she whispered, eyes shining. Selma returned the squeeze, warmth rising in her chest. Evelyn's gratitude was quiet, but it was real. It steadied her, even as the others looked on with hardened stares. Then it was Selma's turn. She stepped forward, every inch of her aware of the silence. His smile was faint, but his eyes were fixed entirely on her. "Mr. Voss," she said evenly, "thank you for the paints." Something unreadable flickered across his expression. "You intend to use them?" "Yes," she said. "That's why you gave them to me, isn't it?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice until only she could hear. "Not exactly. You surprised me yesterday. That doesn't happen often. I reward what I value, Miss Rayan. Don't mistake that." Her grip on her duffel strap tightened, her pulse thudded, but her tone stayed calm. "Reward?" she echoed. "If you want women to believe your rewards mean anything, perhaps you shouldn't spend the night proving how icily they can be discarded." The faintest crack rippled through his composure. He tilted his head, studying her as if she were a puzzle he meant to dismantle. "Ah," he murmured. "So, you saw?" "I did. And what exactly did you see?" His voice was silken, Dangerous, a lapse in taste, or a lesson in how fragile devotion is when it's built on nothing. She held his gaze, steady despite the chill creeping through her veins. I saw a man who thinks attention is the same as value. I saw that not everyone agrees. For a beat, silence stretched between them. Then his lips curved into a slow, deliberate smile. "You'll be back," he said softly. Not a question, not a promise, a claim. Selma's chin lifted. "Perhaps you imagined too much," or perhaps he countered, "I imagined just enough." She stepped back, breaking his gaze, and turned toward the doors. Outside, the line of black cars gleamed, chauffeurs waiting. Her bike leaned against the portico wall, modest beside the polished vehicles. A few staff members lingered nearby. One tapped the bell lightly, making it ding. Selma laughed, a soft, unforced sound as she adjusted her duffel and prepared to leave. The other women sneered at the display, but the staff's affection was real. It warmed her, if only for a moment, before she swung onto the bike and pushed off down the long drive. From the doorway, Alaric watched. His expression was smooth as glass, but his eyes never left her. He saw how easily she laughed with others, how quickly warmth gathered around her, and something twisted inside him, sharp, cold, possessive. Every smile she gave to another, every man who lingered near her, every laugh she shared at his expense, all of it felt like trespass. In that moment he knew, Selma wasn't just a fascination. She was a threat to his control. Any man who stood too close to her would be a rival. She thought she was leaving him behind. But to Alaric, her laughter, her defiance, even her warmth with strangers, none of it was distance. It was a tether. And he would make sure it drew her back to him, no matter who he had to remove along the way. The familiar clatter of her bike chain followed Selma. She coasted into the courtyard and leaned it against the railing where it always rested. The city smelled faintly of damp brick and oil, the last of last night's rain still clinging in the cracks of pavement. It wasn't beautiful, not like the mansion, but the sight of her building steadied her chest. She carried her duffel up the stairs, keys jingling faintly in her hand. The lock turned, and the door opened onto her small apartment, uneven floorboards, secondhand furniture, the faint scent of soap and dust. Imperfect, familiar, safe. She set the bag down with a sigh, letting the silence settle. Then came a knock. Her heart jolted. She hesitated, then opened the door to find Gregory standing there, a takeout bag in his hands. His brow was furrowed, his expression caught between worry and relief. "You're alive," he said, half teasing, half serious. "I didn't answer your phone." Selma blinked, glancing at her screen full of unread messages. "Sorry, I lost track." He lifted the bag slightly. "Then breakfast's on me, unless you'd rather be alone." For a moment, she considered saying yes. Solitude meant control. But the silence of the mansion's corridors still pressed against her ribs, and Gregory's steady warmth was something she could breathe in. "No," she said softly. "Come in." They ate together at her small kitchen table, the one with the uneven leg that tilted toward the window. Gregory unpacked the food, talking about his weak professors, deadlines, his roommate's latest disaster, filling the space with small, familiar noise, but his eyes kept slipping back to her. Noticed the way she pushed food around her plate more than she ate, the way her gaze lingered out the window before she answered. "You're quieter than usual," he said finally. "What happened?" Selma shook her head. "Nothing." "Selma." His voice was gentle but anchored. "You look like you've been somewhere that took more than it gave." Her hand stilled. Alaric's words pressed at her memory. "I reward what I value." "It's complicated," she murmured. "But I don't think I'll be taking that courier job again." Gregory leaned back, folding his arms. Good, that whole thing felt. Off. Like walking into a room where everyone knows the rules but you. That tugged a small laugh out of her, though it faltered quickly. "You always make things sound dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic," he said quietly. "I just don't like the way it shadows you. Whatever that place is, it isn't built for someone like you. And that's not a reflection on you, it's on them." Her throat tightened. She wanted to explain, to tell him everything, the cold way Alaric had looked at her, the sharpened stares of the other women, but the words stuck like stones in her chest. Later, after the dishes were rinsed and stacked, Gregory lingered by the couch, shifting uneasily. "I'll stay here tonight," he said suddenly. His voice was quiet but firm. On the couch. Don't argue. Just let me. Selma blinked, startled. Gregory, you don't have to. I know. He cut in, softer this time. But something's wrong, and until you figure it out, I'd rather be here than leave you alone with it. For a moment she considered brushing it off, sending him home with a thank you and a smile. But the truth was, she didn't want to be alone. Not tonight. Gregory smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made space instead of taking it. Good. Later, she lay in bed, listening to the small sounds of him settling on the couch, muttering about how uncomfortable it was. The ordinariness of it was almost enough to lull her into peace. For the first time in days, she slept without dreams clawing at her. Far away, the mansion was not as still. Alaric paced the length of his study, the click of his shoes sharp against the floor. Victor stood by the desk, posture steady, his eyes on his employer, with the practiced calm of someone who had weathered many storms. "You're sure?" Alaric asked, his voice tight. "He stayed overnight?" Victor inclined his head once. "That's what the report says. He arrived with food left in the morning. He didn't leave in between." Alaric's jaw clenched. His mind filled the blank spaces with images he couldn't bear. Gregory inside her apartment. Gregory close enough to hear her breathe. Gregory standing where he should have been. She let him stay, Alaric muttered, more to himself than to Victor. In her home. Overnight. The word caught like glass in his teeth. Overnight. Victor's tone was calm, a tether pulling him back from the edge. "You don't know what that means? You don't know the details." "Know enough," Alaric snapped, spinning toward the window. She should have been alone. She should have come back here. He stopped, the slip souring the air. Victor's gaze didn't waver. "Selma is not yours. Not yet. She has no knowledge of your feelings, no sense of obligation to you. If you want her to walk toward you willingly, you can't reveal yourself this way. Not over one night." Alaric's reflection stared back from the glass, eyes hard, mouth curving into something cold. "Willingly," he echoed, as though testing the word and finding it beneath him. Victor didn't flinch. "If you want her, patience is the price. Impulse will only drive her away." For a long moment, silence held. Then Alaric drew in a controlled breath, smoothing the edges of his expression. "Very well," he said at last, his voice silk again. "We'll wait. For now." But when he turned back to the window, the fire in his eyes hadn't dimmed. Gregory had stayed in her home. Overnight, the couch didn't matter. Alaric didn't know about it, and if he had, it wouldn't have softened the blow. The next morning, Selma moved through her apartment with a strange lightness in her chest. Gregory had left early, mumbling something about a paper due before striding out with his bag slung over his shoulder. The couch still bore the imprint of his weight, a quiet reminder that she hadn't been entirely alone. Was rinsing out her coffee cup when her phone buzzed. Evelyn's name flashed across the screen. Selma hesitated, then swiped to answer. "Selma?" Evelyn's voice was low, like she'd checked over her shoulder before speaking. "Yes," Selma said, frowning slightly. "Is everything all right?" There was a pause, the faint sound of Evelyn exhaling slowly. "I wanted to warn you about Alaric." Selma's fingers tightened on the cup. "Warn me? I haven't seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you," Evelyn admitted. "But I have seen how he gets when he wants something badly. And it never ends gently." Selma's pulse quickened. "You think he's dangerous?" "I think," Evelyn said carefully, "that he doesn't play by rules anyone else can see. When he sets his sights on something, he takes it, no matter the cost." Her tone softened, almost apologetic. "I'm not against you. I'm there because my family expects it. I don't want to be chosen. My life is elsewhere. But you, whether you want it or not, you're already in the middle of this." The silence stretched. Then Evelyn added, quieter still. "Plus, things happen around him. I met him in college, and when things didn't go his way, things happened to people." "What do you mean bad things happened, Evelyn? Did his family or him have people sent to?" Selma couldn't bear to finish the sentence. "No, nothing like that from what any investigation could tell, but I've seen things fly at people when he was upset at them." It happened so fast, Evelyn took a breath before continuing. "At first you thought he just threw it, but I remember one time I was sitting at a desk at the library and some guy was being obnoxious, and we were all trying to study. Next thing I knew, a heavy book hit him upside his head, almost knocking him unconscious. I watched Alaric the whole time. He wasn't even surprised that it happened, and after he turned and went back looking for a book he needed. His whole family is just different." I'm telling you because I don't think you realize how close he already is. I know how this sounds, but please, be careful. No, it's fine. I believe you. The line clicked dead. Selma stared at the phone in her hand long after the call ended, Evelyn's warning sinking into her bones like ice. She knew she felt uneasy around him. There was this sort of hum around him. While it was easy for her to read people, Selma couldn't completely get a hold of his energy. It was like a veil had been put over him, obscuring whatever his intentions were. She also noticed that when she focused on him, whether he had his back to her or distracted by some of the other women, he would turn and look at her. It didn't feel like she was being obvious about it. She didn't outright glare at him, but it was like he knew she was trying to figure him out, read him. After that, it suddenly became more difficult and had no choice but to back off for a while at least. At the mansion, Victor entered Alaric's office, carrying a slim folder. Background on Greg Hale, Victor said evenly, setting it down on the desk. Alaric looked up from the papers in his hand, interest flashing in his cold blue eyes. At last. Victor waited, patient as stone, while Alaric flipped through the file. School records, family details, financial situation, photographs taken at a distance. Alaric's mouth curved, but it wasn't a smile. Ordinary, forgettable, except for his proximity to her. He tapped a finger against one of the pages. That makes him unacceptable. For the first time that morning, Victor spoke. Do you want him removed? Alaric closed the folder and leaned back, steepling his fingers. Not yet. Better to let him talk. Some men reveal more when they believe they've earned your friendship. His eyes gleamed. Set up a visit. He works at the hospital, doesn't he? Victor inclined his head. Yes, and you own it now. That afternoon, Gregory's hospital hummed with its usual rhythm, the squeak of sneakers against tile, the smell of antiseptic and coffee lingering in the halls. Staff bustled, heads bent over clipboards and patient charts. But the atmosphere shifted when Alaric Voss arrived. He moved through the corridors flanked by administrators, his blonde hair catching the fluorescence, his expression polite but unreadable. He shook hands, complimented efficiency, asked questions about staffing ratios and supply budgets. To anyone watching, it looked like a wealthy patron examining his investment with sharp attention. Gregory hadn't expected to meet him directly. When the head nurse ushered Alaric into the staff lounge where Gregory was sorting charts, he froze. Mr. Voss, the nurse said brightly. This is Gregory Hale, one of our residents. Excellent record. Alaric extended his hand. His grip was firm, his ice blue gaze steady. A pleasure, Mr. Hale. I hear good things about you. Gregory returned the shake guarded. Thank you, sir. Alaric tilted his head slightly, studying him the way one might study a specimen. Tell me you're close with Selma Rayan, are you not? Gregory stiffened at the casual drop of her name. We've known each other a long time, he said carefully. Alaric's expression didn't change, though his eyes sharpened. Ah, fascinating young woman. Did you know she paints? Gregory blinked. Of course. She's talented, though she'd never admit it. Alaric's lips curved faintly, and she hides it. Curious. Duh. He leaned back slightly, as though musing aloud. A soul like hers shouldn't be wasted. Where does she draw such depth from, do you think? Gregory hesitated, wary, but Alaric's voice was so smooth, so seemingly genuine that he found himself answering. She's been through more than most. She lost her parents when she was young. Foster care after that. It wasn't easy. But she always found ways to create something beautiful out of what she had. Maybe that's why she wants to work in environmental science. She wants to protect what others overlook. For a moment, something flickered across Alaric's face. Triumph, interest, hunger, all wound together. He masked it quickly with a polite nod. Remarkable. He rose, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. Well, I appreciate your time, Mr. Hale. I like to know the caliber of those working under my roof. Gregory's brow furrowed. Under your roof? Alaric's smile was all surface. Didn't they tell you this hospital is mine now? With that, he left, administrators trailing after him. Gregory stood frozen, unease prickling the back of his neck. Something about Alaric's interest hadn't felt like philanthropy. It had felt personal. The conversation replayed in his mind, the deliberate way Alaric had asked about Selma, as though each word were chosen to unearth something hidden. He sat heavily on the lounge chair, rubbing a hand over his face. Why Selma? Why her? He thought of the girl who used to sit under the library's broken radiator with a sketchpad balanced on her knees. The one who always insisted she wasn't good enough even as she drew things that stunned him into silence. He thought of the way she'd saved every spare dollar to apply for programs she couldn't afford, refusing to let her past cage her future. And now some gilded stranger with a perfect suit and a predator's eyes wanted to know where she came from, why she cared, what had shaped her. Gregory's stomach nodded. He didn't believe for a second that Alaric Voss cared about Selma's art or her career dreams. This was about possession. It's about interest twisted into something colder. He considered calling her, warning her. His hand hovered over his phone, but then he thought of her face, the way she'd looked last night, pale, restless, avoiding questions. She already carried enough. Would telling her make things worse? He slipped the phone back into his pocket with a muttered curse. Not tonight. But if Alaric came near her again, Gregory wasn't sure he'd stay silent. Selma did not often look back. The past was a landscape she had trained herself to cross quickly, eyes fixed on the horizon, refusing to linger on its ruins. But Evelyn's warning clung to her like smoke. He doesn't play by rules anyone else can see. It made her remember how easily rules could be broken, how easily a life could fracture. She had been 8 when the world taught her that lesson. Her parents were aid workers, not wealthy, not famous, but stubbornly committed to a kind of work most people dismissed as hopeless. They lived in a small coastal village overseas, a place where fishermen pulled in their catch at dawn, and children swam in waters that glittered silver blue. Her father worked with soil and water purification, her mother with medical outreach. Selma had spent her days trailing after them, chasing lizards across rocks, or scribbling in a battered notebook she carried everywhere. Then came the spill. It wasn't fire or explosion, nothing cinematic. It was silence first, then sickness. An upstream plant leaked toxins into the river that fed the village. Fish died in heaps along the shore. The air turned metallic, the water sour. Villagers fell ill, some quickly, others slowly. Her parents stayed when others fled. They believed their work mattered more than safety. By the time the government intervened, her parents were coughing blood. Her mother's hands shook when she tried to hold Selma's, and her father's voice rasped like paper tearing. Within months, both were gone. Selma remembered the smell of the clinic where they died, antiseptic layered over sickness, and the hollow weight of being sent back to the U.S. alone. The foster system was not kind at first. She was moved 3 times in 2 years, each placement colder than the last. Some foster homes treated her as an obligation, others as a paycheck. She learned to keep her head down, to hide the strangeness of her grief. Then finally, she was placed with the Baileys, a couple who noticed things. They noticed the way she asked endless questions about the soil in their garden, about the quality of tap water, about the bugs she caught and lined up in jars on the porch. They noticed the way she stayed up late reading anything she could find about rivers, trees, and air. Instead of telling her to stop, they encouraged it. Her foster father brought home used science kits from flea markets. Her foster mother took her to the library and let her check out books far above her age level. They praised her curiosity instead of treating it as a nuisance. For the first time since her parents died, Selma felt something like safety. Art came later, not as ambition, but as release. When the questions crowded too tightly in her head, she drew. When she felt anger boiling at the unfairness of what had happened, she painted. It wasn't for show. She never thought of herself as an artist. It was simply a way to breathe when the air felt too heavy. Her foster parents loved that too. They let her cover the garage wall with murals, wild shapes of sky and ocean, forests and roots. But whenever anyone asked her what she wanted to be, Selma's answer never changed. I want to be a scientist. I want to stop this from happening again. Her classmates sometimes laughed. You want to save the world? Good luck. But Selma didn't care. It wasn't about saving the whole world. It was about remembering her parents, remembering the village where fish washed up belly up, remembering the children who coughed themselves to sleep. It was about never letting their deaths become just another statistic. Now, sitting in her small apartment years later, Selma felt that old fire in her chest again. She hadn't thought of those days in years. She didn't like to. But Evelyn's voice had dragged it forward. When he wants something, he takes it. Alaric Voss was the kind of man who treated everything as acquisition, And like that did not stop at borders, whether they were made of land, money, or people. Selma clenched her hands in her lap. She had survived the loss of her parents, survived the cold churn of foster care, survived learning how fragile the world was. She would survive him too. Selma arrived at the mansion just before dusk on Friday, the chill air biting as she pedaled up the long gravel drive. Another weekend stay, another circus performance as Alaric Voss is the ringleader. The women on the terrace noticed her first, their sequined gowns catching light like knives, champagne glasses raised to their lips. Selma felt the weight of their gazes before her tires even crunched to a stop. Inside, the housekeeper led her to the parlor. Alaric stood waiting, blonde hair haloed in the fading light, blue eyes cold and bright. His smile when he saw her was slow, deliberate. "Selma," he said smoothly, as if her name itself belonged to him. "You came, you commanded," she replied simply. He chuckled, that low practiced sound, and with a motion like a magician's sleight of hand, slipped an envelope into her palm, as agreed. "Da!" The weight of it startled her. She tucked it away into her duffel, saying only efficient. "Necessary," he corrected, his gaze steady on her. "Choosing a bride is not a decision I make lightly." No, Selma thought. You drag this out because it keeps them all unsettled. That night at dinner, the whispers were sharper. Two women giggled about her student wardrobe, one even remarking loudly enough for her to hear, "It's sweet, really." Like watching a child at the adults' table. Selma flushed, but Evelyn cut across the table. "Selma, come sit by me." The room quieted. Selma obeyed, grateful though she could feel the laughter clinging to her skin. Alaric across the table watched with an expression that was not amusement, not approval, but something sharper, as though he was testing her and everyone else at once. Selma looked at the room. It felt like the shadows didn't match him. She was trying not to let what Evelyn said get to her. Maybe it was her imagination. Maybe she was overthinking. But she noticed it had always been like this. It wasn't enough for everyone to notice. Maybe he was like her and didn't realize it. He had different gifts or something. Friday night, she left her room again, this time peeking around every corner to make sure she didn't have another encounter. This time, wearing a proper robe she'd forgotten to pack last time, she stared out the window. But her gaze fell on something not quite ... right. It looked like a dog, but it wasn't quite a dog. And when the light of the garden hit its eyes, they were a burning red, its head tilted upward to look at her, staring with intelligence. Selma's heart was going to leap out of her chest. "Ms. Rayon," Victor stated. Selma jumped back and grabbed her chest. I'm sorry. Are you all right? I didn't mean to frighten you. But Mr. Voss wants everyone in their room and not roaming around tonight. We're doing security checks." "No, I'm sorry, ... but I just thought I saw." ... Sadie. Selma looked out the window. There was nothing there now. Victor looked confused. Saw. "Oh." He looked out where she had been looking through the window. "It's nothing. I'll go back to my room. Sorry to trouble you." Selma walked swiftly to her room. Victor looked over at her, watching her the whole time. She had seen them. She was a rare human indeed. But most humans didn't believe their eyes, so he didn't worry about it much. Saturday morning dawned crisp, the garden laid out in a picture of elegance. A brunch table groaned under platters of fruit and pastries, white umbrellas casting pale shade. Conversation swirled until Alaric steered it like a current. "Charity," he said, sipping his champagne. "It reveals more about character than most realize. Tell me, how do each of you give back?" The answers came, rehearsed and glossy. "My family hosts a spring gala for the arts. I sponsor a polo tournament, children's literacy. We fund a gallery each summer, international." Selma's turn came. She hesitated, then said, "I volunteer at a pet shelter. Sometimes I buy meals for people I pass on the street. It's small, but I feel it makes a difference anyway, and it's real." A silence fell, sharper than the laughter had been. Few women smirked. One let out a stifled laugh. Alaric tilted his head. "Real?" he echoed, his eyes narrowing. "Explain." Selma drew a breath. "What you do when no one's watching, that's who you are. Not the galas, not the headlines. The small choices." The silence lingered, some women exchanging incredulous looks, others dismissive. Alaric's gaze sharpened, his attention locked on her like a hawk sighting prey. The conversation drifted on. but Selma felt the weight of his eyes long after. By Sunday evening, the air in the mansion thrummed with tension. The women gathered in the grand hall, gowns glittering beneath chandeliers, eyes bright with nerves. Alaric appeared at the head of the room, his presence commanding silence without effort. At his signal, a servant entered with a silver tray lined with long-stemmed white lilies. "Roses," Alaric said smoothly, "are predictable. Lilies endure. Tonight they mark who remains." Gasps rippled through the line. The ceremony had never been named, but they all understood now. He began. The first lily went to a woman who beamed, clutching it as if it were a crown. The second to one who squealed, tears already streaking her cheeks. But when the third woman's name was not called, she stepped forward anyway. "White, you didn't call me," she stammered, her voice cracking. Alaric's expression didn't waver. Engagement is more than attendance. "You contributed little this weekend." The color drained from her face. "That's not true." "I was with you at dinner, i.e. enough," he said, his tone cutting.
Another woman's name was skipped. Her face hardened, and she laughed bitterly, tossing her hair. "Oh, so I'm not deep enough for you? Maybe you prefer charity cases." Her eyes flicked venomously towards Selma. Alaric's voice stayed smooth. "Not all beauty is depth. Not all behavior has class. You've just proven that now." The humiliation struck sharper than rejection. She stormed away, her laughter ringing false. Each lily given narrowed the group. Relief mixed with panic as names were called. Tears mingled with rage as others were left behind. The hall became a theater of raw nerves. And then, Selma Ryan. The room stilled. Her breath caught. She hadn't wanted it, hadn't even imagined he would include her. Still, with every gaze burning her skin, she stepped forward and accepted the flower. Its petals glowed pale in the candlelight, too pure, too false. A murmur swelled, confusion, disbelief, outrage. Some women glared openly. Evelyn's face stayed calm, but Selma caught the flicker of unease in her eyes. Later, Selma found Alaric in the study. The fire painted him in golden shadow, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. "You shouldn't have given me this," she said, holding up the lily. He turned, his smile edged. "Shouldn't I?" Selma stopped for a second. She noticed that he was standing very close to the fire, but it wasn't bothering him at all. At that moment, Alaric moved his feet further as if to correct the mistake, but didn't say anything. Selma shook her head as if to snap herself back to the situation. "I'm not one of them." "And yet," he said, closing the distance, "you stood in line. You took it. Because you forced me to." Her voice was sharp. "What choice did I have? You humiliated the others in front of me. What was I supposed to do? Throw it on the floor?" "That," he murmured, stepping close enough that his breath stirred her hair, "would have been bold. I'd have admired it." Her fingers tightened around the stem. "Then take it back." She thrust the flower toward him. For a moment, he only smiled. Then his hand shot out, clamping around her wrist, iron strong. Selma gasped, startled by the sheer force in him. He loomed above her, height and strength pressing like a wall. With deliberate pressure, he forced the lily back into her palm. His voice was velvet over steel. "No. It's yours." For one dangerous heartbeat, Selma saw it in his eyes: hunger, possession, desire unchecked. He wanted to kiss her, to claim her, to take more than she was willing to give. She tore her wrist free, stumbling back. "You're a terrible person," she whispered. Then she fled, clutching the flower. Selma did not wait for morning. Before dawn, she packed her duffel, left the lily on the desk, and slipped away on her bike. On the bed, she left a note in neat, steady handwriting: "You've paid me enough. I won't take the rest. Do not contact me again. This isn't worth what it does to the others, or to me." Victor found the note and delivered it to Alaric in silence. Alaric read it once, then again, his jaw tightening with each line. He ripped the paper in half, then again, his breath coming sharp. She dares, Alaric. Victor's voice was firm. Do not. Alaric's fists trembled, fury rising like fire. She thinks she can walk away from me? You'll undo everything if you lash out, Victor said. She doesn't understand yet. Let her breathe. But Alaric's gaze burned toward the torn scraps of her note and the lilies still lying on the desk. His obsession had only deepened. And Selma had just drawn the first true battle line. Selma's legs ached by the time she coasted back into the city, the dawn air sharp against her face. Her duffel pressed uncomfortably against her back, and the note she'd left behind at the mansion weighed heavier than the petals beneath her feet. By the time she reached her apartment, her hands were trembling so badly she nearly dropped her keys. The small, quiet space had never felt so precious. She set the duffel down and leaned against the door, drawing in long, shaky breaths. The lily was gone, left on the bed in that gilded house like a rejected crown. Still, she could feel it in her palm, the phantom press of Alaric's hand forcing it back into hers. Her wrist ached from his grip. She collapsed into the couch without undressing, pulling a blanket over herself like armor. The world outside dimmed as she closed her eyes, exhaustion dragging her under. It was nearly noon when Gregory's knock pulled her awake. Selma? You in there? His voice was careful, the way it always was when he thought she might be afraid. She opened the door, hair mussed, eyes still heavy. Gregory's expression softened immediately. You look wrecked. Thanks, she muttered, voice rasping. That's exactly what I was going for. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, dropping a paper bag on a counter. The smell of takeout rose warm and grounding. Eat. Then tell me what the hell happened this weekend. Selma pulled the food out automatically, soup, bread, something simple. Her hands steadied as she ate, but the silence between them grew heavier. Finally, Gregory leaned forward. You left early, he said. That note you texted me about? What did he do? Selma stared into her bowl. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, he gave me a lily. Gregory frowned. Like a flower? Like a brand, she whispered. The memory slammed into her, his hand crushing hers, the heat of his body towering over her, the certainty that he would have taken more if she hadn't fled. She set the spoon down, hands tightening into fists. Gregory's jaw flexed. Selma, this guy isn't used to being told no, and you don't have to do anything you don't want to. I know, she said quietly. But he doesn't see it that way. To him, it's a game. Everyone else was desperate to win. Some of them, God, Greg, some of them embarrassed themselves, begging, crying, tearing each other apart. And he loved it. Her voice cracked, and she pressed her hand to her face. I can't do it again. I won't. Gregory reached across the table, his hand warm over hers. Then don't. Let him fume. He doesn't own you. She wanted to believe him. But in her bones, Selma knew Alaric Voss was not a man who tolerated being denied. Back at the mansion, Evelyn lingered in the shadow of the corridor, the muffled sound of Alaric's rage still echoing behind the closed door. She had heard enough to know Selma's absence had unbalanced him. She pressed her lips together, weighing silence against risk, then pushed the door open without knocking. Alaric was still standing, the scraps of Selma's note crumpled in his fist. His knuckles were white, his chest rising and falling too fast. He turned sharply, and for the briefest instant, the mask of composure slipped. Evelyn. His voice was a warning. She crossed the room slowly, every step deliberate. I know what I heard. And I know you. You're walking a line that won't end well if you don't stop. He narrowed his eyes, something feral flickering there. Don't interfere. The words landed like a slap. Evelyn's breath caught, her shock plain, in all their years of friendship, through his indiscretions, his arrogance, his games, he had never once spoken to her as if she were expendable. You've never threatened me before, she said softly. Be careful, Alaric. Because once you cross that line, you can't come back. His jaw clenched. Then, as though realizing how far he had gone, his face shifted. The fury bent into a crooked smile, charm curling like smoke. Forgive me, he murmured, sinking back into his chair. You know how I get when I'm denied. But perhaps you're right. I should be planning the wedding instead of fuming. You'd make a lovely bridesmaid for Selma, don't you think? Evelyn's stomach turned. The jest was too sharp, too pointed, as though meant to remind her that he already considered Selma chosen. Her gaze hardened. Don't go too far. Not with her. And not with me. She left before he could answer, skirts whispering against the polished floor. For the first time, Evelyn felt the subtle crack in their long friendship. She had always thought she could temper him when he tipped too close to the edge. Tonight, for the first time, she wasn't sure. Later that night, the knock was sharp, deliberate. Selma froze, spoon halfway to her mouth, finishing what was left of the soup her friend had bought her. Gregory texted when he was about to come by. Neighbors didn't bother. This was different. She eased the door open just a crack, and her stomach dropped. Alaric Voss stood in the dim hallway, tall enough that the bulb overhead cut a pale ring across his hair, leaving his eyes in shadow. His coat was too fine for the chipped paint, his posture too straight for the sagging floorboards. He looked like something carved from marble that had been misplaced in a crumbling building. What are you doing here? Her voice came out sharper than she intended, brittle as glass. His gaze swept over her, unreadable. May I come in? Every instinct screamed no. But he wouldn't try anything here. Not in a place where he stuck out like polished silver in a drawer of rusted forks. Too visible. Too risky. Her silence was enough. He stepped forward, ducking under the low door frame. She let the door swing wider rather than make a scene. Inside, the apartment seemed to shrink around him. He glanced once around the room, the thrift store couch with its sagging middle, the mugs drying in the rack, the photo frame on the wall. He belonged to high ceilings and velvet drapes. Here, he looked out of place, almost absurd, yet the air thickened with his presence. He lowered himself onto the couch, one frame folding awkwardly, the cushions groaning in protest. His knees nearly brushed the coffee table. It should have looked ridiculous. It didn't. The refinement clung to him anyway, like a second skin. Selma stayed by the door, hand curled around the knob, pulse hammering. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said finally, eyes flicking to her wrist. His voice was softer than she expected. Sometimes I forget my own strength. Her laugh was short, humorless. That's not something you fix with an apology. I know. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. That's why I came. No masks. No performance. The truth. She narrowed her eyes. And what's the truth? His gaze locked onto hers, sharp and unwavering. That I want you. Every way possible. I could make your life easier. No more bills, no side jobs, no struggling. You'd have the best paints, the finest tools, the freedom to focus on your studies. I could buy you the life you deserve. Her stomach twisted. He was selling her a dream like it was property. So I'd be your pet project. His mouth curved faintly. You'd be my wife. She pressed her back harder against the door, needing its solidity. And Gregory? The name flickered something hot and ugly across his face. Your friendship would have limits. But he would be tolerated. Selma's breath hitched, a mix of fury and fear. Why are you telling me this now instead of finishing your little game with the others? His expression soured, bitter at the word game. Because they were never real contenders. They were placeholders. Faces to fill a stage. I knew the moment you walked into my office, you were better than any of them. Her throat tightened. And what do you think a wife does for you, Alaric? For the first time, he faltered. His composure cracked at the edges, the words catching before he forced them out. She would keep me from being alone. His voice dipped lower, rougher. I don't know what love is. I've never had it. But you're different. Special. Selma felt the echo of it, not just his words, but the loneliness pulsing under them. Her sensitivity caught it like static in the air. He wasn't lying. He was hollow, desperate, gnawing at the edges of his own emptiness. And yet, that truth made him more dangerous, not less. Her jaw set. You need to leave. Find someone more accommodating to your ego. Someone who'll sit quietly in your mansion and smile on command. You'd be bored of me the moment I settled in. He rose slowly, towering over her now, filling the space until it was hard to breathe. His shadow stretched across her, swallowing the light. You think I'd be bored of you? His voice was low, dangerous. No. You'd warm my home. And my bed. Before she could react, his hand cupped her jaw, firm, unyielding, and his mouth crushed against hers. It wasn't tender. It wasn't asking. It was claiming. His kiss was heat and force, branding her like fire against her skin. This wasn't just a kiss. She'd been kissed before. This was more like a brand, like a spiritual stamp had been placed on her body but in a common place. Selma shoved at his chest with both hands, fury and fear quailing tight in her belly. He pulled back abruptly, breathing harder, eyes blazing. You are mine, he said softly, the quietness more terrifying than if he had shouted. One way or another. Her hand shot to the doorknob, yanking it open. Get out. He smirked faintly, though his gaze never softened. You'll see. The truth has a way of settling in, Selma. On his way out, he paused. His fingers brushed over the door frame, tapping it as if leaving a mark. The door shut, and Selma locked every bolt and chain, her breath shuddering in her chest. Then she threw the window wide, gulping air, trying to purge the smell of him from her lungs. But the echo of his kiss lingered. So did the promise in his voice. That night she felt a presence in her apartment, but it didn't feel threatening, she felt guarded. Watched over, not intimidated. For some reason, a memory flashed to Alaric tapping her doorframe.
For the first time, she realized, saying no to Alaric hadn't ended the game. It had only raised the stakes. Selma found Gregory waiting on the steps of her building, his backpack slouched at his feet, stethoscope cord peeking from one of the side pockets like it had been shoved there in a rush. He looked tired in the washed-out glow of the streetlight, his dark curls unruly, eyes rimmed with fatigue. You're going to burn yourself out, she said softly as she unlocked the door. That's med school prep, Gregory replied, forcing a grin. You've got to burn a little early to show them you can handle the fire. Inside, he dropped his backpack onto the chair he'd claimed on countless late nights. The apartment was small, crowded with textbooks, paintbrushes, and secondhand furniture, but it always felt alive with her presence. Selma moved with easy care, small gestures that made him feel steadier than any letter of recommendation ever could. How was it today? He ran a hand down his face. 14 patients back to back. I feel like my fingers are still typing notes. But Dr. Bernstein said I'm picking it up fast. That's good, Selma said. He's one of the ones who could write me a letter. She leaned against the counter, watching the way his shoulders carried both exhaustion and quiet pride. You'll get in, Gregory? I know you will. Maybe he tried to laugh, but it fell flat. Sometimes it feels like one mistake, one wrong word, and it all goes away. You know how competitive this is? Hundreds of applicants just like me. More polished, more connections, more money. Selma crossed the small space, setting a steaming mug of tea into his hands. But not more you. For a moment, he just stared at her, the weight of those words settling over him. His throat tightened, though he hid it behind a sip of tea. You always say the right thing, he muttered, half embarrassed. And here I am, unloading when you've got your own problems. She smiled faintly, but her gaze slipped away. We all carry something. Yours just happens to come with charts and deadlines. Gregory leaned back, stretching out his legs with a groan. The quiet between them was warm, familiar. He felt the tug of sleep, but also something else, that dangerous edge, where friendship blurred into something deeper. He caught himself staring too long at the way her hair fell loose over her shoulders, the curve of her cheek lit by the lamp. "Don't look at me like that," Selma teased, breaking the silence. Her tone was light, but there was a warning in it too. Gregory flushed, chuckling to cover it. "Yeah, sorry." Selma returned to the counter, but her own heartbeat had quickened. Didn't want to think about how fragile this comfort was, how easily it could be broken. Gregory, too, thought about the precariousness of it all. His studies, a strange arrangement with Voss, the way the world could tilt with a single careless move. He didn't know Alaric's full intentions, but instinct told him that Selma's safety and his own future were woven together in ways neither of them could control. Still, for tonight, there was tea, tired laughter, and the fragile grace of being seen. The next day, the hospital felt different. Gregory noticed it the moment he walked in, a subtle shift, the way conversations dropped when he entered. The waiter residents exchanged a glance before greeting him too quickly. The air seemed heavier, tinged with caution. During rounds, Dr. Bernstein, usually brisk but fair, paused longer over Gregory's notes than necessary. "You're thorough," he said, then added, "but thorough isn't enough. Accuracy under pressure matters more." His tone was sharper than usual, and Gregory felt the sting of it. Later in the hallway, one of the nurses, who had always been kind, lowered her voice as she passed him. "Be careful, Greg. Someone's watching closer than usual." Then she hurried away before he could ask what she meant. By the end of his shift, the weight of unseen eyes pressed against him with every step. Something had changed, and it wasn't just in his imagination. The following evening, Selma opened her door to find Gregory standing stiffly, shoulders tight, face pale with a tension he didn't bother to hide. "What happened?" she asked immediately. He dropped into the chair without waiting for tea this time. "It's the hospital. Something's off." Everyone was. Strange today, like they'd been told to watch me. He gave a humorless laugh. "I kept thinking I'd written the wrong meds down or missed something huge, but no one said it directly. Just impressions, looks, warnings." Selma frowned, unease crawling down her spine. "Do you think it has anything to do with him?" Gregory didn't answer right away. Instead, he rubbed his temples, eyes haunted. "He doesn't even have to say my name. All he has to do is make a call, and suddenly the floor tilts beneath me." Selma's chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was imagining it, but she couldn't. Not with Alaric. "Gregory," she whispered. He finally looked at her, his jaw tight. "Promise me you won't let him get between us." Selma swallowed, unable to give him the easy promise he wanted. The text. Her phone buzzed on the counter. "Alaric Voss. My office. Tomorrow at 7. Don't make me wait." The message sat there, glowing like a brand. Gregory leaned forward. "Who's that?" Selma turned the phone face down, pulse hammering in her ears. "No one," she lied, though the name burned against her skin like a mark she couldn't erase.
Thanks for watching.